drummers that are drummers and don't even know that they're drummers. Here's a little something for Kwaku Daddy.
Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. We're here in Santa Rosa, California with a musical healer and a drummer from the inside out. George Marsh, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Sometimes it's hard to speak after playing.
I understand. Project your voice. Make sure you project your voice for the audience, too.
Hello out there.
You know, I wanted to ask you a question about something.
Sure. Please do.
The idea of... I want you to talk to younger cats who might be insecure about soloing when there's no form of the song. Harold Jones was talking about it, the great drummer. He was never comfortable doing that, soloing when there's no form. And I wanted you to talk about how you evolved in that and what's your advice for younger cats today.
Well, I get what Harold said. There's something about the comfort zone. I think you have to forget about that and dive in and find out what happens. But you need to know several different styles, I would think, and also basics like cross rhythms and textures, and diving into it by yourself and giving yourself, I think, well, Pauline Oliveris once said something really nice to me. We were improvising, and she said, George, just give yourself permission to create music and solos in a long form. And that really helped me open up, so you don't have to say everything in 4 bars or 8 bars or whatever. You just start, and if you give yourself permission to hear the sound of a cymbal, it could lead to another cymbal. Okay, so it's your show, and I think, and that can be scary. And in fact, it's almost always a touch scary. But if you go ahead and practice it in your, at home, and work with textures, rhythms, all kinds of different sounds, and listen to what more modern drummers are doing, like with all kinds of ways of preparing the instrument, like putting cymbals on your drum heads, just creating so-called noise, but utilizing it in a creative way for yourself. Just do it and get into it and enjoy it. Now, if you can do that and you're deeply into it and you're feeling it deep inside of yourself, you will capture that audience. You absolutely will do it. But if you're playing in a place where everyone's coming to meet other people, they're drinking a lot and having a great time, that's maybe not going to work. And so I think it depends on the audience that you're playing for. And not to put down places like that where people come in and they're hanging out, and that's great. And you play a certain way, you play certain kinds of music, people need to groove and get down, play blues, play jazz, play funk, play all kinds of different things, and you play a solo within that. Okay, do it and get through it. But if it's a concert where people are really wanting to absorb what you're doing in a different way, go ahead, present it to them. And the feeling uncomfortable is part of it at first. But after a while, I think it's to me, of course, I'm way different from Harold, even though we're friends.
He was talking more like about a Buddy Rich kind of guy, where the dynamics would go way down, and he would just start to come up with a melodic solo, not within the form of the tune, but just his own.
And that's the Buddy Rich style. And Buddy Rich.
But you have your own George Marsh.
I have my own style, and there's all kinds of other styles of drumming. Buddy Rich. Here's how I look at this. Buddy Rich was the absolute best Buddy Rich there ever was. Harold Jones, you're not going to find a better Harold Jones. And truly is the way I look at it. Frankly, I'm really getting bored with all the mechanistic drumming, and it's wonderful what they're doing. I just admire that. But, okay, bring me some melody, bring me something else. That spirit is great, that strength is great. But I just pine for something else, something that has more space, that has something deeper to it. And there are drummers out there, and I probably don't remember their names or know their names offhand. There are drummers that are doing that. They're presenting, they're drumming in a different way, from a deeper place. Because some of my favorite drummers from years ago, one of them was Connie Kay with the Modern Jazz Quartet. He played really simply, but he's just as profound to me as is Ringo Starr and these various drummers. He's just as profound as Buddy Rich. But Buddy Rich is the absolute best Buddy Rich. He did stuff that was still driving drummers crazy, and I really love it. I love that. I love that aspect.
You've always wanted to drive people crazy too. I mean, you push the envelope. I mean, can you talk about or even demonstrate the kind of sounds that you and Denny and Mel were locking in on with all those albums that you made? You talk about listening to all sorts of different sounds. You guys were into the stratosphere with that stuff. Was it just the stuff that was coming out of your apparatus, or was it stuff?
Well, we had all had listened to, and Mel Graves and myself had played music of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen and composers of the 60s, 70s, and before that who were playing John Cage. It's really a different kind of music, and some people would just call it noise. And yeah, it has noise in it, but to me, it was absolutely great music, because you would play that way, let's say, just like... Yeah. Contrasting noise with something that's familiar. So
no one's asking you to stop, by the way.
Yeah, I know that, but I wanted to stop there.
Yeah.
So the stuff that we did on the early days was there was an introduction. Yeah. Some people told us we were some of the earliest, whatever, I don't know, but with odd time signatures. And Denny Zeitlin, when I heard him back in the 60s on the vinyl, and when I was living in Chicago, and I I decided I wanted to play with him. So when I moved it to the San Francisco, I managed to meet him and ended up playing with him. And one of the things I asked him very early was, how do you play in 7/4, Denny? And Denny, being who he is, he figures things out quickly. He showed me a rhythm, immediately solved it.
He showed you on the kit?
Yeah, Denny could play drums, and he showed me a simple.
Denny could play
rhythm.
drums. You're always breaking new stuff. Denny played drums.
Well, he did. He could sit down and do it.
So he showed you the rhythm, and then
He was way better at drums than I was at piano. I got to tell you. But he showed me a simple rhythm. If I have that in my mind, I can solo over it, and I'm playing fluently, melodically, and not having to worry about counting the same way. That was amazing to me, but it turned me on to some ideas, and we did some things back then that were in some really different time signatures. One of them that by exploring, I tend to treat the study of rhythms almost like science. You work on these ideas, and you play them, I record them and listen to them, and 9 out of 10 are thrown away, which is just fine, because that's the way it works. You want to try all. That's how science is, as near as I can tell. You challenge it. Well, one of them that seemed to work really well was in 15 or 7.5. And
delightful.
We recorded some things back then, and on expansion, I believe, and also later on the Mel Martin album, Listen, there was something called Aural Hallucination, which was also in 15. Another way to think of it is 7.5. 7.5/4 is the same as 15/8 notes. And so I could play a little bit of that for you.
It would be great. It said demonstrate the 7.5.
I think I'll count it even, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But 15/8 has a lot of different things that can happen with it. I just scratched the surface there. I'm going to continue. I'm going to start it again.
Please,
okay.
People are clamoring for it.
Could be faster. I'm getting old. I can't do any longer than that.
Let me go talk a little bit about John Abercrombie. When he came out here to Berkeley in '84, he said the only cat that wanted to jam was George Marsh. and you used to pick him up in the station wagon, or something, you know. And I want you to just talk about what you loved about John Abercrombie, even as a person, and how that emotive quality sunk into his incredible playing and the collaborations you guys did.
Well, I heard him on one of his early albums and just was completely mesmerized by his playing before I ever met him. And then I don't remember the exact circumstances where I met him, but actually I think he then lived in North Beach in San Francisco. And we jammed probably out on a gig someplace. And then I don't remember the details about how we started to get together. But what I did like about him is he's John Abercrombie, really well known, had already recorded with whom I considered the great jazz artists of that day, but he could have been anyone that I had known locally as a player.
Right.
There wasn't an ounce of him that was above in any way. His love was to get together and create.
He was horny to play.
Wanting to play, and we would get together and try things, try different ideas. What about this? And we would, for instance, that 15 thing, I could have easily said, why don't we do that? And he would have come up with something, and if we liked it, we would have continued with it and recorded it on a little player just to see how it sounded. And we even listened to a Brahms, I don't know if I mentioned that to you, Brahms' Third Symphony. We listened to the third movement of it. It was very moving, the third movement of Brahms' Third Symphony. Poignant, talk about blues. And
fascinating.
He worked on it for a while and got it, but we didn't have time to finish that. But this was also at a time when my daughter was just, Lucy, was just about to be born, and so I was in that space, that heavenly space.
Yeah.
And he shared that with me. And basically, I would get him, I don't know, we probably started around noon, and then his fiancée would call him. Always call John, you have to come home. Because I think that, well, by then she knew him well enough that he'd just keep going and go, oh, wait a minute.
All night.
Yeah, well, if he could. And as the years went on, when he was in town, visiting, I think, Lisa's relatives or Lisa's sister, he would come over and just bring his guitar and amp, and we would just play. So that's basically it. John Abercrombie, whom I think is one of the greatest jazz guitarists, I think many people will agree, was just a friend. Would come by, and we would hang out.
Can you talk about the collaborative, how to work together as a team, especially in a duo, how to put your ego aside? I mean, with John, he didn't have an ounce of that. You know, he just wanted to play.
Exactly.
But when you have a duo, two very gifted players, and maybe one's more insecure or both, how do you get out of the way of your ego?
If I have my ego going, you mean, and feeling insecure? That's what
well,
you're
I
saying?
guess the idea is you made some great albums just as a duo, and two incredible players.
Well, the one with, John Abercrombie was one.
Right.
Mel Graves was another one. Noam Lemisch was another one. So I really like the duo. I think it's because when you get three people, the possibilities really increase fast.
How do the possibilities expand from a duo to a trio?
Well, I could think in terms of three limbs. Okay. If I use two limbs, there's one group of two limbs. Here's another one. Here's another one. Okay. That's 1, 2, 3 possibilities. There's also this one all by itself. There's this one by itself. This one. That's 6, isn't it? Then there's these two. These two versus that. That's 7. These two versus that. That's 8. There's one more. It's 9. And then there's all of them. That's a lot of possibilities just by adding one person.
Wow.
Does that make sense? Yeah, it makes sense to me. But
a lot of your students are chiming in. It makes sense to them.
Yeah. And it's so like, drumming is hard enough, or not hard. It's just fun enough, and there's enough to work on with two limbs. But when you have all 4, hey, and there are certain prescribed ways of playing that work great. And then there's also, because of the way that I like to practice myself and teach, and it's through the inner drumming concept where you work with all the limbs in different ways that may not be anything that you immediately are going to use, but down the road, who knows what's going to happen? Music's going to keep changing. And especially if you get into the more, I would say, freer improvisation, which brings me to the subject of deep listening. I think that the main thing, what other kind you're doing, is the other kind of improvising. You want me to keep looking this way, but I have to.
No, people want to see your face.
I know, but I have to get like a new. I have to get a new body down here that actually has a pivot. Okay, hello, and so what I was saying is deep listening is how to listen to one another, so that you're hearing as much as you can. So there's so many aspects to this. So you can actually improvise together using music games, music schemes. There's a word, schema, that I heard, few years, quite a few years ago. And the idea is, okay, we're together, we're going to play games, we're going to go through these various ways of playing together that are going to explore music, but we're not going to try to play the current hit, the current style, the current in, none of that. What we're going to work on, for instance, is texture. Okay, what does texture mean? Well, to me, I will show you, means okay, to me that's a texture of metal and some tom hits. Okay, so that could be, instead of saying texture, I think texture is the best thing. It could be that each improviser could define what texture is for themselves individually. A guitarist might make certain kinds of fast sounds. I don't know for sure. But that would be, okay, let's improvise together. That's what our focus is, and let's see where it goes.
Right.
So when that happens and people are listening in that way, composition very often naturally occurs by itself, because that's what we do. We start something, we do something in the middle of it, and then we finish it. And if the group is listening to one another while they're listening to their textures, that happens. If someone isn't listening, then it doesn't happen. And it gets down to, okay, if you're playing with other people, you're improvising, and it just isn't working right, there are ways of working with other players that help remedy that. One of them I love doing is like a copy game. So let's say I'm playing with a bassist, a really fine bassist, and I'll say, I'm going to play something for you. It's not going to be very long rhythmically, but however you can, will you please copy it? So I might go. The bassist has to go. And if the bassist can't do it, you do it again. You keep working until the bassist figures out how to listen to what the drummer is doing to be able to actually copy it in some way. I did this with Doug Leibinger, wonderful jazz director at Sonoma State, trombone player. We were doing that. Everything was going fine. Then it was his turn to play something for me on the trombone. So he goes, meow. So that was funny. On the drums, I don't know how to do that, So I tried to go. So, in other words,
make it fun.
Make it fun. It's a game. You can't go wrong.
Is the inner drumming, though, is it latent when you say you may not use it right away? Like, does it get buried into your subconscious?
That's a really good question. I'm thinking that it's to decondition yourself.
From what exactly?
From the licks that your drummers play.
Facility.
We all need the licks. But does everything have to be? Maybe some kind of music that has to be there.
Right.
But if you work on that particular thing and maybe slowed it way down, what's really going on? Okay, you're hitting together. Whoa, wait a minute. Now those two together. Then you get it down to what's hitting together and which limbs are hitting together. Do you lift your foot what's going on here? And you slow it down to the point. Maybe that's not the best
I dig.
example, but you slow it down to the point where it's like you're looking at the inside of it with a magnifying glass. So you feel every part of it, just like you can't feel when you're playing it. And you hang out there for a while, and then you bring it back up again. Play it faster, and bring it back down, and look at it, and look at it. And that's one way to do it. And then the other way to do it is to say, well, if what I just did consisted of let's say that much of it. Okay. Slow that way down, just that part of it. Okay. I'm feeling movement through my whole body. Then here. That's nice, but what about, let me see, what if I, okay, instead of this side, it's this side. Okay, you might not ever use that, but it did help decondition in a way because you gave yourself another option. That's kind of the best answer I can give you, except that when you work around all these different possibilities, and then you go play the music that you need to play that has its parts, and you have to play those parts, or the music's not going to work. Other players are relying on you. I'll be doing that this Friday and Saturday with David Grisman. We'll be doing all kinds of things that go until my wrist hurts. So no, but I really need to know that part, and it fits beautifully within it. But what you don't want to feel is stuck. So
that's got to, yeah. But that the deconditioning is absolutely essential. You know, for the audience out there, you know, Chano Pozo and Armando Peraza, Babatunde Olatunji obviously was the main cat from Africa. But can you talk about how to play a trap set with guys like Quasi Badu? I know you were working specifically with African percussion, but how do you play a trap set with Quasi?
I didn't. I didn't. I played a small.
Could you?
I have to think about that a minute. Well,
I mean, explain who he was too. Who he was, because Unheralded Cat, a genius.
I studied with him in 1970, and I believe he was teaching at UCLA. Don't totally quote me on that, but he came to the San Francisco Conservatory and taught for a month in 1970, and he didn't speak a lot of English, and we all got together, and most of the people didn't play drums. And we had traditional African drums, we had bells, big drums that he said you wouldn't be able to play except that he was given permission to bring them over to teach us because they were the king's drums. And there would be parts that he would show us, and we would just play them, and then he would put other things on them that were just mind-blowing at the time, absolutely mind-blowing. But you had to hold the part. And I learned a whole lot about the way I think, and this was confirmed later, that the African master drummer has to think. He hears one downbeat in the piece, but he also hears another downbeat in the same piece, and maybe another one. So there's more than one way of hearing a particular piece, which might actually have 10 people playing 10 parts or doubling on those parts. So he showed us a few things that had definitely two downbeats in them, and I explored those. So now how to actually do that with him, I think I could play regular jazz groove with him and it would work.
Really?
Yeah, because he would be like there's one piece.
Like what kind of
He
groove?
played on these Atupanis, big drums that had elephant ear.
What do they call it? Atupani?
Something like that. Yeah, they had big elephant ear heads on them.
Oh man.
Maybe they waited.
Yeah, that's not cool. They're not trinkets.
No, but I think they waited till they died. I hope.
In Africa,
Too late now.
That's right.
But so he had these large drums that he would be playing like that. Actually, I'm going to do this. drums, and a smaller part over that. So if this, that's the time was. Okay. And this, he had the whole class going that as if it was really 1, 2, 1, 2. And he was going 1, 1. In other words, all turned around.
Was he using his hands or with sticks?
He was using sticks.
Sticks.
Yeah. I'm only doing this to get you the sound, but these are the sticks that come out like this.
Yeah.
And they go like that.
I saw that
Beautiful.
on that record. It's
Right.
very evident, you know.
But a lot of the feelings. Here's the bell rhythm. Sa 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 na sa. Something like that. And with that would be. But that's just the beginning of it. So that's to answer your question, how would I play with that, with him? Now, I did some things with Kwaku Daddy.
Right.
And he was the person who showed me how to play. Actually, what I just showed you was called the Adwa, and that's the way. I think there are quite a few variations on the Adwa, and that was Quasi Badu, my simple interpretation. But Kwaku showed me a version that I could play on the drum set because he had conga drums set up in front of him, and he was left-handed, so I could just. It was like a mirror. It was perfect. He didn't have the feet thing happening. And that's what I played for the solo starting, which the solo has. Okay, so that's on conga drums. And when he played it for me on conga drums, it was explained, and it makes sense. It was a reduction of what would have been played by 20 people, 10 people, lots of people. So it's like an orchestral piece, so let's say, by Stravinsky, reduced for a piano. It's similar to that. So he showed me that. And the part that changes is here. So. See what I mean?
Subtleties, yeah.
So, and that's how he did it, by making slap sounds on one of the conga drums, while the melody, this part has to continue. And along with that, instead of a shaker type of instrument, this could go. And the other part, I have three brains going on. Anyway, I love that piece, and there's a bell pattern that fits with it, and I teach this to all my students in the classes, and almost all of my students, I pass this on.
Right.
Cray, cray, kite, cray, kite. People out there can say it with me. Cray, cray, kite, cray, kite, cray, cray, kite, cray, kite, cray, cray, kite, cray, kite, cray, cray, kite. Cray kite is in a class of, it could be 50 people. They've never played drums before. All you have to do is have them say cray kite, cray kite. Okay, now clap it. Cray kite, cray kite. There you are. And it's actually an interesting rhythm that fits in this 12/8 piece called Ottawa and can be heard from different viewpoints. It's a kind of a universal rhythm that it appears juxtaposed in Afro-Cuban pieces, and the Afro-Cuban rhythm is generally heard in 12/8, like is in 3/4 slide. That rhythm there's a certain place within that rhythm. If you start it, what you get is cray, cray, kick, cray, cray, kick, cray. In fact, I think I can play both at the same time. See?
Before I let you, I mean, this has just been exercise in vibration and enlightenment, and a lot. And I'm telling you, for people, down the road when we're long gone, I mean, this is therapy 101 and the best education you could get. Before I let you go, Marsh, George Marsh, can you talk about a guy who's tuning in right now, a dear friend of yours, Paul Farso, and why you enjoy playing with Paul?
Well, Paul listens so deeply, and he plays from such a loving, accepting place. And we just immediately go to this place of listening to one another, and we have this history with the loading zone. He did really help me quite a bit back in 1969 to help me fall into a certain place in the pocket for playing funk. And I had come there with this Denny Zeitlin freer playing viewpoint also, and also coming from Chicago. And I contributed that. So I think together what we did was created another kind of music. It's funk-oriented, but freer, a little more fire of a certain type. And trust for one another. So even though we don't get together that often, we just sit down and play, and there it is.
Was it an East Bay pocket, Oakland funk pocket that he? And how did he?
I don't have any idea.
Well, I mean, it was an Oakland-based band, the Loading Zone, basically. That when you're talking about regional.
Maybe it was, but see, I didn't think of it that way. I just come and play with people. I don't. I seriously, I don't.
Well,
think...
How did he?
He didn't define it to me as that way. It's just getting together to make music.
But seriously. Denny demonstrated on the drums. How did he get you comfortable in that groove?
When he demonstrated that?
Yeah, well, you said he got you comfortable playing.
Oh, yeah, he just showed me a certain way to lay back on it. I forget exactly what it was. We probably listened to some things, listened to James Brown things and so forth, listened to those things. But there is a certain way of laying into the backbeat. Now, the backbeat is really emphasized in certain types of funk, and then, of course, it's syncopated. Whereas in jazz, it's different. It's not the same kind of emphasis. The jazz could be more on top of the beat. I remember I was thinking, wow, I listened to Mongo Santa Maria. I didn't like where they were laying the backbeat, and I listen now, it sounds perfect. It's just that there's these different ways of playing the backbeat. So as far as why is it so great to play with Paul, was because he's always listening, and we just played in Fairfield, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago, and it was filled with, 300 people, 350 people, and probably most of them were meditators, and is one of the best audiences I've ever played for. The audience allowed us or listened to us, and the music just came out. Now, listening back, the music sounds good, but it wasn't a thing of we were doing it to try to create something that sounds good. It's rather a communication.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that way. And so this was an amazing group of people who afterwards came up and said things to me like, we heard every note. How about that? They could hear every note. That an audience actually thinks about hearing every note is amazing to begin with. But that was just across the board as far as I could tell. All the people were like that. And that's how Paul is. He hears what's going on. And he's also a walking encyclopedia of all the different types of funk and rhythm and blues players. It's just amazing.
Yeah, the One for All album is remarkable. What is, in summation, what gives you hope that live music will continue there'll be links in the chain for it to flourish again as a professional medium? Basically, you want more gigs. You play gigs, but you want more. I don't even know what your students are looking at as a career when they leave school now, because there's no jingles and commercials and union scale studio sessions. And so at the end, Marsh, as an optimist, as somebody who looks towards the light, what gives you hope that live music will become a profession once again?
Well, they want to play live music. They want to communicate with other musicians. They know how powerful it is. They know what it is if you play live music for other people, that experience is quite a bit something different from having constant sound in your earbuds or going to the restroom in the airport. Turn it off. I don't want to be serenaded, you know. Everywhere you go, there's just too much sound. But what gives me hope is their love for the music. Now, as far as there being places to play, I can't answer that. I don't have a hell of a lot of hope for that. Mm-hmm. But the art of it is going to continue for sure. And how we present that might be in specialized concerts. Or there might be a rebellion of sorts where people just get tired of hearing the same stuff with auto-tune, the same rhythms. People are just mesmerized by this stuff. It's the same sound, it's the same backbeat, it's the same. I mean, there are certain variations within that. But me saying that, there's all kinds of people, musicians now, creating their own music. So what I'm thinking is these subgroups are going to get stronger. It's not going to be like, it can't be like it was when there was a jazz scene. We don't really want that. It
was pop music at that time.
Yeah, it was. But I think that
do they? I want to be clear. Your students, their love of the music or their love of conversation within the music. To me, when I listen to Bill Evans, like Scotty LaFaro, Denny Zeitlin, Mel Graves, George Marsh, it's about the conversation.
Yeah. Well, then that is what I'm saying.
So it's about playing with other people, not even getting paid for it, but just playing with other people.
Playing with other people and then playing for other people.
Right.
And that's where it's at. So I don't think that's going to die. I think that it could be that what I was getting to, just trying to think of this through, is that there will be kind of a change, or I hope a rebellion in a way. Let's have more live, real music rather than this phony stuff. You know, and
let's stop having sit down shows only. I mean, let the body dance. I went to an Elvin Bishop concert. I walked out. I never even bought the ticket because there was no dance floor.
Yeah.
You know, I realized that. You know, so listen.
I agree with you. I heard.
I mean, people. I go up to the front because I want to feel the vibrations in front of the PA systems. I want to hear the sound. And people are saying, "Can you? You know, you're blocking my view." I said, "Well, you just move right there."
Well, I want to say one thing about that. I heard these African musicians, obviously from Senegal. This is 15 years ago, in San Francisco, and you had to sit down to hear it. And they were dancing up and down the aisles, and all these rhythms were happening. I literally felt my whole being start to growl, and I almost had to jump up and move because that's what it's about. And do they ever have that nailed and how to do it? Dude, yeah. You're supposed to do that, and then you go into this place of trance or whatever you want to call it, and it's healing. It's wonderful. So I agree with you. It's the dance part of it. Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing George Marsh this Friday at Freight and Salvage with Jim Kerwin and David Grisman and George Cole and the rest of the cats. Can you play a Rebellion solo before we close out?
Sure.
All right.
I don't know what that is.
Exactly.
Yet. I don't know.
That's the fun part.
I'm not going to play that. I'm rebelling.
Thanks for your wisdom, George Marsh. It's the
Great
Jake
being here.
Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.